Hello, everyone. Welcome here again. I am tonight talking with my amazing friend. I have the opportunity to meet him months ago in a marvelous class that he offered about his book, Aradia. He's Craig Spencer from England. He's a witch. I take my notes this time. He's an Anglo-Italian witch and also is an author from Llewellyn Publishing. He made this book about Aradia or Aradia that take all the work that we know about the famous Bible of the witches. He made a whole reissue of the book, trying to make a more correct, advanced translation, a better work in general. He reanalyzed all the chapters, chapter by chapter, and give you a whole new perspective of the book. He taught English and he taught Italian, so probably this is very helpful because in the editions that we have, usually all the translation is not very good, it's not very pretty, it's not very accurate. So it's a very good work that he made. I'm honest, I just read half of the book, but I really enjoy it. The Gospel of the Witches, or the Bible of Aradia, I say the Bible because the Spanish edition that we have in Latin America is called the Bible of the Witches, not the Gospel. Was first published in 1899. It's a celebration of the goddesses Aradia and Diana, the Roman goddess. Takes the story of the Estregans from the La Toscana, the witches from in the Italian folk. So I'm just giving the introduction here because the expert is him. And he probably, I'm for sure, he will talk totally better than me. Hi, Craig. How are you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me. We had a bit of a technical issue, but yes. Hopefully everything will be fine.
Yes, take us like half hour doing this. Probably was for me, but we find it. We survived it. And was a pretty nice time. I don't quit, and you either, and we are here. Thank you for your patience.
Well, thank you for yours. I truly appreciate it.
So, Craig, first of all, let me personalize this a lot. I need to know, where do you live?
Where do I live?
Yes.
Yeah, so I live in the north of England. So England is pretty much, people who haven't visited the UK won't really know this, but we have a massive culture divide in England. There is a big line that runs through the middle, and it is the north and the south. And I'm a product of the north culture, which is very different to the south. I don't want to offend anyone from the south, so I won't go into why those differences are or what people think, but people tend to say that we're quite more friendly up north. I'll just leave it at that. We're generally more sociable, we'll chat with people. If you get on a bus with a northerner, you will, by the time you get off the bus, you will know their life story, you will know their medical history, you will know what their third cousin's doing, you know everything, and then you'll go, see you later, as if you know these people who you're never going to meet ever again. But we just love conversation, where when you go down south, it's very much keep your head forward, don't talk to people, and just go where you're going. So nice. Yeah, we have quite different cultures. The south was more a product of when the Romans came and invaded. We had Roman occupation in the north, but we weren't part of the Roman Empire, so I think that's made a big difference. We had more Saxon influence than the south did, so I think we've just got that bit of a mesh of different cultures, and it sort of shapes things like our accents and the words that we use. So yeah, I'm in the northwest, so I'm in Greater Manchester. There's a bit of history for you.
No, thank you for that. It's a lot of information that we don't know, that I don't know, and this is really nice. Everything that you're saying, I am taking notes about it. If one day I want to meet England, now I have something in my mind about it. Thank you for that. Tell me, which in general is your favorite thing about where do you live? Something that you really love about your city. Something that you really like.
Oh, okay. So the thing that I love the most about being in Greater Manchester specifically is the acceptance that we have here. We have such an acceptance of diversity and inclusivity here. You can see literally everything down one street, and it's not there for show. It is literally just the people. You know, we had the world's first ever gay village. We had it was where the suffragettes came from. You know, so we have the women's rights things very strong here. We've got our witchcraft history here with the Pendle Witch trials. So really, we are really big at embracing just difference and diversity and culture. And you can walk into any classroom or down any street or the high street, and you meet literally everyone from all over the world. I particularly remember there was one German lady that I spoke to. She was an older lady when I was a lot younger in my teens, so before I could drive, and I was on the buses. And she said to me, I've lived absolutely everywhere all over the planet, and here is the most friendliest place and the most diverse and the most accepting place that I've ever seen in the entire world, and that's why I live here. And she didn't need to live here. There wasn't a particular other reason for her to live here. It was purely just for the fact that she just loves how diverse and accepting we are. So I think that's something to be very proud of and something that I really love about where I live.
Wow, this is very nice. And the way how do you describe it is so welcoming for everybody who don't know the place. I mean, now it's like a duty, it's a responsibility. If you want to go to England, you need to pass for these places because you will feel welcome. You should promote your country. You should work in tourism and these kind of things because you're doing a very good job. And I really like when people say these kind of things about the cities because I don't travel too much. So I like when people give these kind of descriptions about not just the structure and the architecture, but also about the people, about how people feel in there, because immediately they transport me to the place, and I really appreciate that. Thank you, Craig. You are awesome. You're pretty awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Now, I had the opportunity to meet you because you offer a class, a virtual class about Aradia, and all the folk related with all the folk and lore related with the book of Aradia, the famous Gospel of the Witches. Tell me two things. First of all, how do you find Aradia, all the lore in your life? And second of all, how was the process to create this book for you?
Wow. Okay. So when I first came across this book, I was
ask how much you want. You can say everything that you want.
Okay, I will. I'll tell you a story. Okay. So when I was about, I want to say around 14, 15, I first read the book, and it was one of those things that I think because it's had such a big influence on the global revival of witchcraft that started in Britain. It's a book that I think everybody sort of finds eventually, particularly here in the UK. So when I first came across it, it was just interesting seeing something that had shaped both the British side of things, but then it also spoke to me for the Italian side of it. As I was going through it, there was things that I liked the stories, but I found it a bit hard to connect with the material. And then as I went through, I think it took me a few times before I actually looked at the Italian. I think I was being quite lazy and just reading everything that was wrote in English. And then it took me a while before I actually started comparing the two things where there was the sections of Italian text. And I sort of thought, oh, well, that doesn't really say that. And it really started changing my perspective on the stories and the way that things were presented. So I'm always like a note taker, so I end up with all these notes and scribbles and they're dotted about everywhere. I'm not very organized, so a note goes here and then another goes here and then another goes in a cupboard somewhere. And then when I decide, oh, I want them notes, it's like, where is it? And I'm digging everything out. So yeah, I wanted to start writing books about witchcraft, but this was not any of the books that I had planned to write. So I did this book. I'm on my second draft of my second book now. I've started outlining my third book. None of these books did I ever plan to write. They're all just things that have sort of happened, and then I've responded to it. really, it was a conversation with my mum. So she was just talking about a book that she'd seen. I can't remember what it was. She said, "Oh, so and so's got a book," and then we started talking about books. And then I said, "Oh, I noticed there'd been another reprint of Aradia recently, but it only had a new foreword." And I said, "I'm surprised no one's ever tried to, go a bit deeper and break things down and trace where things came from." So at the end of that conversation, she said, "Well, didn't you take notes on that like years ago?" And I said, "Yeah." And then she said, "Well, why don't you write the book then?" And I thought, yeah, why don't I write the book? So about 20 minutes after that conversation, I'm sat at my computer, and then I just thought, I'm just going to open up a Word document. I'm just going to start typing. And I sat there for a couple of months, just typing everything out, not having a clue. I didn't have a contract. I hadn't pitched it to anybody. No one knew I was even working on the book. I had no idea what I was going to do with it when it was done. I didn't particularly think anybody would be interested in the book. I just thought, I'm going to write it because I've started writing it, and so I have to see it to the end now. I got to about chapter 7. I think it was chapter 7, and then I had a bit of a mental breakdown. I was looking at English, I was looking at Italian, I was looking at really old sources that had Latin in it, and then I'm like, where's this French come from? And I'm like, oh, I need a break. So I had about a month out just to recharge. It got to the point where I was watching a cooking show and someone was speaking Italian or something, or it was an Italian dish, and I turned the channel over. I was like, I'm sick of Italian. I'm sick of hearing anything about Italy. I don't want to do it. I was ready for throwing my computer out the window, but I took a breather, I rebalanced myself, and then I was like, wow, what was that about? So then I just carried on writing, got to the end, and then I was like, now what? So I was like, I'd probably put it up online or sell it for like 50p if someone wants to read it, but in the meantime, I'd sort of thought, well, I'll have a go. So I sort of put a little email into Llewellyn and didn't think anything of it. Then they got back and they sort of said, sort of quizzed me a bit. I think they wanted to know like my credentials, my credibility, and then it was just sort of like, oh, okay. And then a bit of radio silence. I knew that they had 3 months to look at it, so I knew I couldn't just put it up online. I had to give them that 3 months. But within about a week, I had a message in my inbox, and it just said, "Yes, we'd love to take on your book." And I was like, for about 5 minutes, I was just like, no. And now I'm reading it about 4 times, like, my English must be betraying me. Like, they have not said they want this book. They did. So I was like, there you go. I told them what cover I wanted. There was a particular image. So the Witches of Benevento are very popular in the mythology in Italy. It's known as the City of Witches quite informally. So there is this really iconic image of devotees dancing around a sacred walnut tree. So I was like, I want that on the cover. It speaks to the content of the book. It speaks to Italy today. It speaks to the culture. So I really want to have all that wrapped up and stuck on the cover. If a picture says 1,000 words, and I wanted it to really talk about what the book was about. It wasn't just some dusty old book from 1899. It was something that was fresh and relevant for people today. I said, make it not look old. It can look classy, but not old. Because if it looks like it's been wrote by a dead guy, no one's going to want to read it. I want people to know I'm alive. So they designed it. I thought it was beautiful. I got my copies, and then I was like, woohoo, I have a book. Does anyone actually care? So as the months sort of went on, I getting messages on mainly Instagram, and people were, I was really gobsmacked, not only how much people really loved the book, but how much they felt like, because I tried to frame it in a way that towards the end I've added a part 2 so it can sort of be how it relates to practitioners today. People were really saying that it had caused really big changes for them. They've had personal revelations. People have got over issues. I obviously don't want to break confidences and describe any of those things, but speaking very broadly, people have had got over issues of self-acceptance. They've felt like they've sort of been pulled out of a bad space in their life by reading the book. They've been saying that they've been reading back over certain sections again and again, and they found it really empowering. And that's really surprised me. But it's a beautiful thing that something that started just as a sort of a random side project that I got my teeth into, and just was a case of, it's sort of like in my head, I can't let it go, has really had such a positive impacts, and it's connecting me with such beautiful people. Then I got the opportunity to speak at WitchCon, where you were speaking. That's where we've connected. And so again, I've met even more wonderful people, and yeah, I'm just very grateful for the book. It was a very weird creative process that drove me mad about the middle, but I'm very grateful for it, for the opportunity that's really helped me to connect with such wonderful and really surprising people, people who I wouldn't have had the opportunity to connect with otherwise. And that's very beautiful to me. I know that's a very rambly and, all out there answer, but it's the truth. And that's my story.
No, it's a very nice story. It's very interesting how you are taking. Every chapter, every story that you are putting here. The cover, the deal with Llewellyn, because it's a big deal. It's a very amazing publisher. Llewellyn has been around for like forever, practically. I think that they are celebrating this year 120 years. It's a lot of time. And the book, this is the thing why I was so interested in your class. I come from South America, where people talk Spanish and Portuguese. I just have the opportunity to read a small extract of the book, badly translated in Spanish, very wrongly translated, because when I started to take English and I read it again, was like, okay, this is not what is there. This is not the meaning of that words. This is not the context of that topic. And I was looking to read it on English. And I like your version because you make the contrast. From the moment that you read the introduction, where you take the time to talk about the original author and how was created or in some way structured all the story and the context of that moment of history when this book was in some way relevant for these people, these little pieces of manuscript. You put all of this together in just introduction. Just introduction is like, okay, this is the most complete book that you will find about it. And then in every chapter, you give like a very small introduction to the chapter. People read it, but also you give a context about the meaning. And that's very nice because this is really helpful because everybody talks and I know a lot of people in the community from different parts of the community and in different countries. And everybody talks about Aradia, and we know very basic things. Oh, yeah, it's this daughter of Diana, and this the daughter with Lucifer, or she changed in a cat, and we have the mouse start turning stars and all of this. But not everybody read the book because many times the book feels heavy at level of language because it's many words that people really don't understand, and you fix that. And that's something that I'm sure that people really appreciate. So when I ask around, this book of Free Expense, a lot of people are like, I know the book, but I'm not really sure why I should read it. You need to read it because it's a really good translation. For that reason, you need to read it. And I really appreciate all the story that you give us, especially the story about the cover. Because it's something, when I see the cover, I like the cover, but I don't note the history that is about it. That's really nice. I have this question. It's in some ways a complicated question that I always do, but it's related with your book. How, in your personal magical work or in your personal tradition, do you feel that Aradia or Diana has some kind of influence? How they influence in your craft?
Well, that's quite an interesting question. So so I've been initiated into traditional Lancashire witchcraft. So Greater Manchester and the neighbouring county of Lancashire at one time, so prior to the 1970s, was one county, and it has a magical tradition that's initiatory. So after that separation and we became Greater Manchester on my side, the people who live here do not say they are from Greater Manchester, unless, like the question you asked before about what do I love about my city, and then I have to sort of frame it that way because that's where people will look. But on all like my mail that comes through my door, it says Lancashire on it. If you ask anybody where they live, they will say I live in Lancashire. The only time in my 30 years of being on this earth, I've ever heard anybody say any different on this side was during the pandemic, where Lancashire got locked down and Greater Manchester didn't. And then everyone's like, well, I'm from Greater Manchester, so I don't have to be locked down. That was the only time you could get anybody from this side to say that we are not Lancashire, because we didn't want to have these restrictions that weren't ours put on us. So when we look at the magical traditions here, I say I'm a Lancashire witch, because that is the root of where that comes from. It's the culture that's embedded into that witchcraft. And it's very much here in Britain. But when it comes to Aradia and Diana, I do feel that over the years, probably when I was about 20, like my early 20s, I started to feel this really big pull where I couldn't ignore that they were there. This presence was there in my life in some way. And I put that down to the fact that my tradition is very strongly ancestral. And so when you're calling to your ancestors, and I'm half Italian, the Italian, the Roman, all that side of it is going to come through, it's going to come up, and it's going to recognize that it's being called on. And I think that is how they're present in my craft. It's through my ancestral part of my craft, and how I honor my ancestors. It's the reaching through, not necessarily of me calling to those deities, but that my ancestors have known those names, and that it's calling through from within my blood, and I can't help, I can't separate myself from my blood. It's in my veins, it's part of my body, it's part of who I am. So when I look at deities like this, I feel like I'm sort of tied into it genetically. Within the Roman culture, and you'll get some Italians who will still sort of make reference to this. I think they're being a bit big-headed when they reference it, but there's an old legend that says that anybody who has Roman blood, which today would mean Italians as well, are the children of Mars and Aphrodite. So I think there's this idea that gods and our blood are deeply tied, but I do think it's more a metaphor. I think it's more about those ancestral connections more than literally being the children, divine children, and all the grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-great-great-grandchildren. I think it's more about blood ties and ancestry. So when I'm honoring my ancestors, as much as my magic's rooted very much here in Britain, I have to bring that in because it demands my attention, and I'm not going to ignore my ancestors, because our ancestors protect us. So I'm not going to shun half of my protection, because then that would be very stupid.
Thank you. Yes. I mean, you don't let me with any question after that, because you are very I don't know the word, but the way how do you explain everything is very like a teacher with details, and I don't have many questions about it, and I appreciate
Before
everything.
I was an author, that was my background. I was a teacher. I did adult education, and I've just finished it. So maybe I need to take the teaching off and put it down. I think that's probably
everything is very you have a lot of clarity about the topic, and it's very easy to understand when you say it. Also, you have this magnificent accent that is hypnotic.
Thank you. See, in my country, my accent is seen as being a very poor accent. We sound horrible, apparently. So I always love when you meet people outside of the UK, because they always like a northern accent, but people here don't generally like the northern accent. I think we're one of the least favourite accents in the UK.
I'm totally new with English, so when it's about accents, I really don't recognize too much the difference. People tell me, oh, this is an Britannic accent, this is European accent, this is East European accent, this is Australian accent. I don't really see the difference. But when you talk, I feel some kind of weight in some words that make them sound different, but at the same time make them sound like in some way like more important, like you know where put the emphasis in every word. That is what I know, but I don't know anything about accents. When people tell me about this is an accent from Texas or Canadian or something, I really don't know, because English is totally new. It's a new word. Greg, my friend Greg, I have two questions, two very silly questions that I always make to my friends. This is very silly. Nobody in any interview in your life will make you some silly questions like these ones. The first one is, do you remember which was your first book on spellcasting or witchcraft?
Oh, let me think. I think it might still be on my bookshelf, actually. I can't remember the author, but I think it's called Spellweaving. There's two books called Spellweaving, but I think Spellweaving might have been. 1 second.
Yeah.
If I can. No, I can't reach it from here. Oh, wait, yeah, I can. I can just see it. This was it. I'm pretty sure that was the book. I think that was my first ever one, which is why it's still on my bookshelf.
Oh, wow. That's nice.
My granddad bought me this one. He's not with me anymore, sadly, but I have many, many books that he got me, and they're all very sentimental to me. If this wasn't my first, then it was definitely the second. It's that level of early. If there wasn't one before it, I don't remember, but this is the one when you asked that I went straight to. It's Sally Morningstar, if anyone couldn't see it on the cover, and it's called Spellweaving. It's a nice book, actually. It's very simple, but in comparison to beginner 101 type books that you get today, it's a lot better. I think some 101 books, because they're trying to make something so complex simple, I think they oversimplify. This, I think, is just the right level where you start getting the nuances very subtly of like Kabbalistic influences and things like that run deep in British craft. So yeah, I think it's a good book. I will say that for it, and it's got some beautiful little bits of things that come from the folklore, particular tree lore that you don't really see anymore in books. So it is a nice book. If people can get hold of it, I would very much say get hold of it. And if you're thinking of getting someone a first book and you can get hold of it, there you go.
Sorry, I muted myself for a second. Yeah, thank you for that. I will try to look for the book and add the link in the description if anyone want to look for it. Really
I have a question for you, though. What was your first book?
Oh, well. My first book, this is the thing. Where I grew up in a part of South America called Amazon, that is between Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, and other places. I grew up in there, and for tradition, magic stuff, they don't let us have books because for the tradition, they prohibit that you write the spells and the things that they teach you about ayahuasca and the spirits and blah, blah, blah. When I moved to the city, you just asked me about the book, but I need to tell you all the story. When I moved to the city, to the capital of Venezuela with all my family, I was one day in a store, and my mom was always like this kind of witch who is buying books and candles and stuff. And I find this book that I really like because it was different to anything else that we have in home. We have a lot of books about history, natives, geography, anthropology of the tribes, and these kind of things. That when you are a children, these are not really interesting topics. And my mom gave me this book that was in Spanish is Magia Blanca, in English is White Magic or Light Magic. This book was written for an American author, a Wiccan author, who is Jerina Dunwich. I'm not really sure how I pronounce that, but it's Jerina Dunwich. She has made a lot of books about Wicca and spellcasting, a lot, like 20 or 30 books. And this was my first one, and also was my introduction to Wicca. because before that book, I just knew about native magic that we do in Amazon and Afro-Caribbean cults, because that is the part of the family. And nobody in family practiced Wicca or witchcraft or ceremonial magic. And this book was my introduction to all of this about the goddess, the horned god, the lunar phases. And I always make this question to every person that I meet in the community, because I have this theory that the first book that you have in your hands about witchcraft or sorcery in some way is like a omen of the path or way that you will take.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, for example, people who their first book was a book on fairies, with the time they probably decided to try other things, but in the end they always go to that path, something related with fairies. And that was my first book, and that I choose and that I has the opportunity to buy. And in many ways,
Oh, I've lost you now. I can't hear you.
with my same publisher, with Weiser, it's like wow, so little work. It's something really interesting. It's something really magical. And thanks for the question.
Oh, thank you for sharing. I lost you for a little brief second there, but I managed to get the story, though. It was fine.
Yes.
It was like a little blip where I just where it went down and then we were back, so it was fine. Thank you for sharing your story as well. I really appreciate that.
My other question here is, do you remember which was your first spell?
Oh, wow. Okay, so I think I know what my first spell was. Only because there is, see, everything with me has a story. I'm obviously, I must be a storyteller. So I think my first spell, the first one I can remember, was a rain spell. I made it rain. So in my family's tradition, in the Lancashire tradition, we say we don't play with the weather. There's a reason you don't play with the weather. But I was young. See, I started my craft training when I was 5 because I was that insistent that I was going to be a witch. It was a case of when I went to primary school and they used to say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I always had 2 answers. I used to say, "I'm going to be a policeman and a witch," or "I wanted to be a firefighter and a witch." The first thing always changed, but the witch bit was always there right behind it. So it was something that it was whether or not they had to see whether I was going to be taking it seriously or whether I was a child in the fantasy of it. But it became very clear that I wasn't. So by the time I was about 8, this sounds terrible, but it's true. People would never believe it, but it's true. Right. So 8-year-old me, I have this vivid memory of being sat in the back of an occult shop. My mum was there. She was supervising. I'm there with, in the north, we have this like blackcurrant drink for kids called Vimto. I don't know if people know it abroad, but it's a very northern thing. So I'm there with this big glass full of Vimto and chatting with this lady in the back in this back room. And it was a case of, what do you want to know about it? Because we're very open about sharing things. People have this thing about oath binding, and I'm going to be very honest. I'm going to deviate off my story slightly just to say this. When people go like, "Oh, if you're Gardnerian, you can only share things with Gardnerians. If you're Alexandrian, only and all these lines. In the UK, this is the biggest lie ever because we're such a small island. We're constantly bumping shoulders with other occultists. We're going to talk. We're going to share information. And then you see things and people go like, "Oh, they got that from us. They got that from us." And it's like, no, this comes from, I see like people debating this and I'm like, no, this comes from this line and people don't know about it abroad because it's not traveled. Dorian Valiente, she's the most famous person who was a Gardnerian. She has a line here that doesn't trace itself back to Gerald Gardner because it's accumulation of, I think she was initiated into 4 different things, and they just call themselves witches. They don't call themselves Gardnerian, Alexandrian, anything like that. And that lineage has not left the UK. people say Dorian didn't leave a legacy. She did. I know about 3 covens that are from her line. It's here, and we constantly talk and share. But then when foreign people like come over, mainly from America, and you hear them and they go, unless they're from our lineage, don't tell them anything. And it's because we know that bigger countries, a lot more gets leaked, where when you're very tight knit and as an occult community, it like, if you don't know someone personally here, you know them by just one person who like you'll be friends with, and then that's your connection to them. That connects you to every occultist here, and everyone shares information. They always say, don't tell anybody, and that's how world finding works here. So I'm in the back of this occult shop, aged 8. There's ladies saying, basically, tell me anything that you want to know and I'll tell you about it. So I've been flicking through books, and I just spit out this day that I want to know about conjuring demons. So the lady goes to me, okay, don't do any of this until you're older, but here's everything you want to know. And I've sat there for a couple of hours learning about conjuring demons in the back of this occult shop, aged 8. So I'm actually, all right, my first spell, I was going to say, where did that come from? Right, so I'm getting quite, yes, I'm this big and bad occultist, 8-year-old me being a tyrant. So I'm like, I'm going to make it rain. I don't care what people say about not playing with the weather. I'm going to use these tidbits that I pull from everywhere, and I'm going to mangle this spell together, and I'm going to see what happens. So I do this spell. Me and my mum were out in the middle of shopping. We're sat down waiting for the buzz to come. I'm muttering away, saying, I want it to rain. And then I finish my spell. I look up, and no word of a lie, it just goes, and everything comes crashing down. So fast forward a couple of years, I'm like, I want to see if I can still make it rain. So I do the spell. I look out the window. Nothing happened. I was so disappointed. So big mistake from me, poor occultism. I do it again and look out the window. Nothing happens. I try it a third time. Nothing happens. So in a sulk, I pack up all my supplies. I shove them away. I'm like, that's a bad spell. So about 10 minutes later, I start hearing the pitter-patter of rain on the windows. Okay, so then it's like, oh, maybe it did work. Then it comes down a bit harder, and harder, and harder, and faster. For 2 days, the street outside my house was flooded. The field, because we have this big dip near the field, yeah. The brook that runs through our entire, runs through the entire north, actually, that flooded. All the street was flooded. All the cars were getting flooded. It wasn't stopping raining. And then my mum said to me, I think you need to do something about this rain. So I did. And within about 10 minutes, the rain stopped. And then after a few hours, all the rain had started going back down the drains. And then my mum looked at me in this sort of knowing look, almost a daring look, saying, don't ever make it rain again. And I have never, ever played with the rain ever again. That is how I know that was my first spell. Or it was a very early one, because I'd say it was the first one I ever did on my own. It was my first solo thing. And I was lucky it didn't bite me in the backside the first time, but it definitely did the second time.
Wow, thank you for the history. Was great. I'm totally sure that a lot of people will relate with that, but because when we are younger and we are starting on witchcraft and sorcery, we always are a little rebels and we try these kind of things. So every time that we listen someone saying no, it's like, go there, go forward and do it. It's something like that. Yes. Thank you. I literally visualized everything that you was telling, and it was so funny, really. It's good that you learned the lesson in the end.
It was, yeah, yes. Definitely. I had earned a lesson, but definitely learned, yeah. I always love a gone wrong spell story, because I think they're the things that normally end up shaping your ethics later. Like me now, it's don't tamper with natural forces, just because I know that it's a mistake. I will say that I once did a bit of a rescue of spirits, some land spirits. That didn't go too well because I was like, some land was going to be built on, and I said to all the fae, oh, well, your home's being destroyed, come and live in my garden. And the garden just went very wild and untamed. But that was less a spell and more just, they're going to just take over it. I said, make yourself home, and they did. They made it into a wild space.
Wow.
But yeah, I always love those type of stories.
Great. Has two more questions. One is, how was 2020 for you?
That's a really interesting question. I quite like looking on the positive of things. When we got to the new year, I have this tradition in my family. So all year we have this jar. It's a big glass jar. So it's kept in the kitchen. And anything that really makes us laugh as a family or just personally, like little inside jokes. And it has to not just be slightly funny, like something that really makes you laugh. We write it down and fold it up, stick it in the jar, don't talk about it again for the rest of the year. And then when New Year comes, we all gather together, we open the jar and we go through everything. We take turns all pulling out something from the jar and we just laugh back over the year. Oh, do you remember this? Do you remember that? So by the time I got to 2020, I actually had quite a few things in the jar that were really funny. And I had to reflect on it, like, yeah, it's been a tough year, slightly funny year, but what was my reflection of the year? And in the end, I had to sort of say, well, it was a good year, not because of the pandemic, but despite of the pandemic, because I didn't lose anybody that I love or I care about, friends, family, anybody like that. So that was a blessing that we were all safe. My book came out in 2020. Aradia came out in 2020. It was put back because of the pandemic, but it's also the time that, as I said before, I got to meet such wonderful people because of it. So I made so many meaningful connections. I'm a big advocate that we need to remember that social media is social media. We should talk with people. We use it for trolling and for selfies and for, oh, look at this pasta that I made. And we don't really use it for talking to each other. And I think we've got such an amazing device and we don't use it. But 2020 for me was a great time. I think a lot of people were at home, they were online, and they made more meaningful connections. So for me, I left 2020 really feeling very blessed because I've met such wonderful, amazing people, yourself included, during that time. My book came out, which has opened up another avenue for me, communicating with people, getting to know people. Although they were involved in the book, I've met many of authors who I've read growing up and connected with those. So it's like those connections as well. It's like, wow, I've got to meet almost people that I really like and who I grew up with reading their books. And now, you know, we're having an interaction about my book and that feels really weird. So I left 2020 very positive. Yes, I'm very empathetic to people who have lost people during the pandemic. It is, of course, a very bittersweet thing, and we're still going through it. But I'm very grateful for those moments of happiness that were within the gloom. I'm a very light at the end of the tunnel kind of person. If I'm in a bad situation, I'm always like, what's the good thing here? And I try and just focus on that one thing. And that was it for me. It was the positives. So yeah, that was my 2020.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, it was a bittersweet flavor, but we did it. That's important. We did it. We really feel bad for because many people lost other people. Many people lost their homes or their jobs and opportunities and things. But we continue here, and we need to be grateful for that because that is what is more important. That we continue here, and we can in different ways honor the people who is not now with us.
Yeah, sure.
Great. You say that you are working in your next book, next project. If you want to use something, a little bit,
Okay.
say something
Yeah,
about
so This is probably my shortest answer, just because I don't know how much I'm allowed to say. But basically, what I've done is there's a few things in witchcraft books, very staple books, where I think some things are almost kept at beginner level. We don't talk about certain subjects at a advanced level. I'm not claiming this is an advanced book. I'm going at an intermediate. Is that the word? Intermediate? I think it is. Yes. The middle road book. It's not beginner, it's not advanced, it's a middle point. That one. So I'm aiming for a book like that, the one that sort of says, okay, let's look at where these things come from, certain practices, histories, and let's talk about things that don't get talked about, particularly because I'm coming from British witchcraft as a whole, so all the different traditions that here, like I said before, I talk with so many people and we all share information that doesn't get out there. And I almost want to say, I'm a bit over reading about my own country from people that have never been here. I have, for example, May Day. I once read in a book, a very popular book, I'm not naming names, it was out not that long ago, and it was said that the May Day celebration used to exist in England, but has not been there since it was either the 17 or 1800s. And I'm sat there thinking, the procession for May Day goes past my house every single year, and I'm sure I don't live in either 17 or 1800 England. I live today, and we still have these traditions. They're not old, we used to traditions. They're things that are still here and we still know about. And so when people are saying like, maybe this is what people did, maybe this is how it happened, and I'm like, I know exactly how it happened because it goes past my house every single year. I know what's involved. When I was a kid, I was involved in the preparations of these celebrations. So I think there's a lost history in a way, and I want to really reconnect people with those things that are missing. And I also want to look at the cultural roots, because I've also seen a lot of witchcraft books go, maybe this is why this is done, or is this here because of this reason? And I don't know why, but people seem to think that British witchcraft owes everything to ancient Egypt. And I'm like, no, we have our own culture. Egypt is on the African continent. It's everything. If you look at African traditional religions today, they speak very much of ancient Egyptian worldview in subtle ways, but it's there. Britain is not part of the African traditional religions. We have our own culture, our own history, and I want to explore that and sort of say, yes, let somebody from the culture speak about the culture and tell you why things are there, and let's not play guesswork anymore. So I really want to almost say, some people might think I'm off-breaking. I've been very careful with the words. If there's like a fence and off-breaking is just outside of the fence, I'm not staying in the middle of the circle. I'm going right up to the edge where I'm just on the border of where I could be accused of breaking oaths, but I haven't crossed the line. I want it so that initiates can go, oh, I didn't know that about the tradition I've been initiated into, but I can see the connections because I know the behind the scenes things. But I want people as well who aren't initiates to say, I have an understanding of a version of these teachings, and although they will be initiated into anything, it doesn't stop them from developing a form of practice that's still meaningful, deep, and can take them to that next level and stop them from just being stuck at basic. So that's really the goal with that book. It's gone through a bit of a structuring. As you can tell by now, I'm quite a storyteller and I just tell things as they are. Some things I've been told, the way I delivered my story is not that there's anything wrong with what I said, but that I may need to word it slightly differently because it comes out in America first, and Americans might not be that open to that level of this is the culture. I've had to slightly bury certain things than me just going, that's my culture, and you're getting it wrong. I'm not trying to slam people, because if people don't know, they just don't know. And that's really the message. It's not me going, you're in a cultural appropriator, how dare you? I'm just saying, let's have a sensible conversation. If we're talking about every other culture on the planet, And I can talk about my culture too, not just my Italian culture. I do feel like a lot of people have seen me as wholly Italian, and it's like I'm half Italian. There's that other side to me. So I'm letting that other side shine now, because it's where my magic's steeped in, where my tradition comes from. And I really wanted to just share a different angle that's not just Gerald Gardner. It has Gerald Gardner in it, but it's not just that. We have so much more here that we can share and celebrate, and I really want to give that its own spotlight. I think Gerald Gardner's had his time. It will never disappear, but we can have other people. There's other people from history like Cecil Williamson. Not many people know who Cecil Williamson is. They've never even heard his name, and yet he's one of the biggest players of the craft revival, the global revival. He even was involved with the British government and witchcraft. It was that big, and we don't talk about it. So my second book is very much putting a spotlight on the things that people don't see.
I am actually fascinated for the conception of the book. I like all the concept. You just sell me the book here. I am ready to buy it immediately. I promise. It's conversations that we need to have. It's conversations that we always avoid about the origin of the things, about the history, the real history of the things, about the culture. And I totally understand you and feel you here, because many times I come from South America. I can put in numbers how many times I find in any book, magical people in Venezuela has this tradition, and I'm like, no, we not. People in Amazon, you can take this herb because in Amazon, shamans do this. No, we don't do that. No, actually, we don't have that herb growing in Amazon. So it's many mistakes like that one that not just misrepresent the history, also misrepresent the whole culture. And it's very interesting everything that you're saying, because it's not a typical book on spells. It's not just here another book on spellcasting. No, it's a whole book about history, culture, and like you say, with some limits, with some barriers that you're respecting, and that's really interesting. And I'm really fascinated for the idea of the book, and I promise I will be there waiting to have my copy.
Thank you very much. That means a lot.
I hope we can have it soon, very soon.
Well, I'm just wrapping up the second draft, and then I'll be sending it off. I know that it's timetabled for. I'm going to be done early. I knew I'd be done early. It's timetabled for, I think it's the 1st of October that they'll start reading the book. So, but I think we're going to try our best to get it out early 2022. I think it's the goal. Whether we'll make that goal, I don't know, but I will work from my end. I definitely think we could, but obviously there's the editing, the designing, the formatting, marketing, all that behind the scenes things that can set things back. But I think from it being written, it's on target for an early release, which is a good thing. So hopefully people won't have to wait too long.
Exactly. Books has their own time. They come out when they want to come out. For example, Aradia coming in 2020, and a lot of authors don't like to have books coming out last year because everything happening. But I think that on the contrary, it was a very good time because everybody was in home reading. So what was very helpful in many ways, because people was trying to distract themselves from the anxiety and from going out, and they were trying to avoid all kind of social contact, and has a lot of opportunities to grow with your circle, with your coven, with your meeting, with your tradition, with your group. And was a very nice deal that Llewellyn in any way pushed the book in 2020 because we have it and we can continue doing stuff from promoting and everything else. And now you have the time to focus in a new one. This is very nice. The books has their own time, but sadly we don't know their time. We have human time that is entirely different. But when the book decides to come out and manifest in the stores, a lot of people will be there to find it. That is what is more important. But I'm really interested in reading it.
Yeah, you're very, very, very true. They are almost like entities, and they sort of you go in with an idea, but they sort of start telling you what they want you to say as well. I think when you start writing a book, it never ends up how you want it to read. It always tells you how it wants to read. It always tells you new things that should go in it, new chapters. So you're right. They have their own time. They have their own mind. We might be the author, but
Yes.
They have a life of their own, definitely.
Exactly. It's a totally different world. Craig, this has been a really funny, incredible time. All your histories, I'm totally sure that people will rewatch this video over and over. Was really funny and was so much knowledgement in this conversation. You go so deep in history and culture. I really appreciate everything that you are saying here. This is a whole class on witchcraft and culture. It's amazing all the level of knowledgement that you have. From time to time, I will pick your brain to ask you questions over and over in social media because I really appreciate the level of intelligence that you have and the level of how you say everything so properly that is so easy to understand, because many times people make some kind of effort to make things understandable, but in the end you are like, I don't understand anything that you say. But with you are a very teachable person.
Oh, thank you very much. That means a lot. Thank you.
Everyone, in the description of this video, you will find all the links to Craig website, Instagram, Twitter, book. Next book, when he have it, we will put the link to, so you can stalk him, follow him, etc., etc., etc. Thank you, Craig, for your time. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just make one point for people very quickly?
You can say everything that you want.
Yeah, with my social media, I just want people to know that I know some people aren't open about being witches and they can't be on their own social media. So if you was wanting to reach out to me, but you're scared of following, know that all my DMs on my Instagram and my Twitter are open, so you don't actually have to be following me to reach out to me. So if for whatever reason you can't be open about who you follow, know that you can still contact me and still keep your privacy. So don't worry about that, people. You know, everything's open. You can reach out and I will get back to everybody as soon as I can. Sometimes I do open messages, but it's just because I might think, oh, I might have to think about how I'm going to answer that properly. Or I might be like on the go. Sometimes I'm like just in the supermarket at the till and I'll open something. And so even if I open it, I am still going to get back. I swear.
You are so responsible and so disciplined in everything. I know like you. I need more people like you in my life. I am a disaster of person. Thank you. And was a really great, responsible advice. Thank you for that. I will try to remember that for the future. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So everyone, thanks for the video. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to contact Craig, you know how. The links of his book and his next book will be there in the description of the video. Thank you, everyone. Be kind, be well, and stay safe wherever you are. And please be kind with everyone else. Be kind, okay? Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.